No Gun's Life is a series that I watched the anime for ages ago and absolutely fell in love with it. Recently, I read the manga and finished up the story, and I must say that I love it even more. This series had everything I was looking for, from great themes that the story tells to awesome characters and amazing art. But besides all of that, the series is also just really entertaining. The manga can be quite dark and covers a lot of darker themes really well. But before talking about that, I want to say one thing about this series. It is nothing like Dorohedoro. Now, some of you might be questioning why I even brought this up, but the reason I did is because I've seen so many people compare these two series with one another. And sure, there are some similarities with these series, but the way the story is being told and the types of stories being told are entirely different from one another. Dorohedoro is mostly a comedy series with a more serious story sprinkled in, whereas No Gun's Life is a more serious story with some comedy sprinkled in. I got a little tired of seeing people compare the two series when they're not even all that similar, so I just wanted to set the record straight a little bit before jumping into the meat of the video and discussing the themes that make this series so good. The impact of war is something a lot of series cover, but the way No Gun's Life does it is super interesting, as this series takes place after a major war has ended, so we really get to see the aftermath of what a war can do to society. We see the society struggle to help soldiers who fought during the war re-enter society due to all the scientific advancements the world made during the war, turning these soldiers into the literal killing machines. We also get to see what happens when one company that was a major contributor to the war being won completely takes over society and how that impacts people's everyday lives. Honestly, No Gun's Life handles this topic really well, but there is one part of this topic that I want to talk about that I feel like really makes you like a lot of the characters way more, and that's how this manga handles PTSD. A lot of the main cast deals with PTSD in one way or another, whether it be caused by the war or not. Juzo is a character who is plagued by his PTSD, and you can see that right from the very first chapter with how untrusting he is of people and how he treats his job. He works himself to the bone trying to move past who he once was, which really makes you like his character way more. Juzo isn't the only character with PTSD in this series. There are so many side characters, as well as Tetsuro, another main character who struggled so much that he made himself completely forget his past. PTSD is something that so many people struggle with on a daily basis, and is something I feel like should be talked about way more, as it can affect the lives of so many people, and No Gun's Life does this in a very respectful way that I absolutely love. What does it mean to be human? That is a question that this series is constantly trying to answer throughout its run. We think traditionally that humans are people who live, die, form connections, make an impact, struggle, and most importantly, have flesh and blood. A lot of the characters in this series try to figure out what it means to be human in a world with so many people who are essentially just robots now. The struggle we see the characters go through, especially the cyborg ones, is really cool, as they have to learn to adapt to not only keeping their humanity, but also having their new powers and abilities. Being human is something most people don't think about in their everyday life, because obviously we're all human. But for some people, it can be hard to draw that line. Whether it be because they see themselves as a monster or other people see them as a monster, whatever it is, we see the struggle that a lot of the characters go through, as the world they live in is one that adapts to one with cyborgs in it. When reading this series, you really get into the mind of Juzo and learn about the struggles of being a man stuck in a mechanical body, and it is done really well. This, and other people's struggles, are things I feel like everyone can learn from, which I think makes this series so incredible. Free will is an important thing that a lot of people take for granted. How would you feel if you were forced to do things that you never wanted to do? Probably horrible. No Gun's Life talks about this in a pretty interesting way. Tetsuro is one of the main characters who has run away from his past and has started to learn the importance of free will. We see his development throughout the series as he interacts with Juzo and Mary. We see him finally break free from his shackles of the past that keep holding him down, which really makes for a really great character that I love to see on the page. Found family is a connection that is oftentimes stronger than that of blood family, as they are people you have chosen to live your life with instead of those that you are forced to live your life with. No Gun's Life brings this topic up a lot with the connection of the three main characters. I don't know if this was the original intention of the series, but looking at the relationship dynamics of Juzo, Tetsuro, and Mary is like looking at the relationship between three siblings. Juzo is the older, reckless brother who tries to protect everyone, oftentimes to his own detriment. Mary is the concerned, loving sister who wants to help everybody out in her family in any way she can. And Tetsuro is the younger brother who oftentimes causes problems, but is also the one who grows into his own with the help of those he cares for. These connections with the characters is awesome in a lot of ways. I love when stories cover found family, as they are always the closest connections people form in life, and seeing how it is done in this series has made me love it even more. There is one question I want to ask regarding this series that I think is something that should be asked, especially in this modern society where we have things like AI advancing at an insane degree. And that is, should we take science this far? In No Gun's Life, they have cybernetics, but not how you traditionally see it in most series. Sure, they have it where you can replace just a single body part like an arm or a leg, but they take it a step further where you can replace everything and essentially become a walking, talking, breathing, and conscious robot. Of course, in real life we don't have a lot of this insane stuff, but it does beg the question, should we? Like being able to replace limbs with robotic limbs that act like a normal arm or leg would help out so many people. But being able to replace every part of your body all at once where all you essentially have left is your consciousness is a bit too far, and the series knows this, but still doesn't necessarily frame it as a bad thing, which I think makes for a really interesting world and story to explore. This series is surprisingly funny, with a lot of jokes sprinkled into the more serious moments of the manga to make the series more entertaining. The comedy doesn't take anything away from the characters, which is why it works surprisingly well. There are all kinds of jokes being told, but my favorite, surprisingly, is the Juzo moments where we see he is still definitely a guy. I don't know why, but those moments are always funny, but there are so many other great moments in there as well. This series is funny, but it doesn't only rely on comedy, but everything as a whole to make it good. No Gun's life has some really good world building in it, especially the early half of the series where we are still learning about the world and the characters. We get to learn how the world functions, we learn about the war, the impacts of said war, and about the politics of this world. Honestly, the amount that we learn about this world in the series is crazy. It makes the world feel so much more alive and real, which I really like. This series also uses show don't tell quite often. It also tells you about the world, but it is not afraid to show you something and make you figure it out before telling you, which is something I think enhances the experience a lot. There are some really good characters in this series. Juzo is a super interesting main character to explore. He has a lot of issues that he has to work through throughout the series. Getting to see his character develop throughout the series is awesome and makes for a really fun ride. Tetsuro is another interesting character. Learning about his past makes his character turn out to be really interesting and makes you love to see where his character goes when watching and reading this series. He gets a lot of development in ways like becoming braver and standing up for his ideals, which I think is pretty cool as he is influenced a lot by Juzo. Mary is an awesome character and a great engineer. She has a pretty tragic backstory that ends up coming back to her by the events of volumes 4 and 5. But seeing her work through this with the help of Juzo makes her easily one of my favorite characters, especially for her personality and her relationship with Juzo and Tetsuro. There are also a lot of great side characters in this series. Olivier and Cronin, who work for the police of this world, are some of my favorites, but overall the characters have a charm to them that might not be immediately seen by some people due to the early parts of the story focusing so heavily on world building. No Gun's Life is a series that I wish has gotten more love than it has gotten. This series is incredibly good, but doesn't get what I think it deserves, so I beg of you, please read this manga or watch the anime if you like darker series about the struggle of living everyday life in a world ruled by corrupt individuals who will do absolutely anything to get what they want and silence those who they want.
May seem. In fact, both local San Francisco papers are investing a lot of money to try and get a service just like that started. Science editor Steve Newman reports on one person already using the brand new system.